Hi, guys, and welcome back to Fearlessly Unfiltered, where the truth has no filter. This week, we are going to be talking about family violence, interpartner violence, and it's a really heavy topic, so I encourage you to prepare yourselves. There is a trigger warning, of violence. So if that is a trigger to you, just be mindful to yourselves. I have Jenn and Alexis with me today. It's going to be a very good conversation we have going on today. First off, I'd like to give Alexis a minute to introduce herself so you guys kind of know her story. Alexis, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Alexis. I've been through my own domestic violence relationship, and then I've also wrote some books on it. This is called Unbearable Loss and Redemption. And then this is my journal. I had my journal, and my son got into it and colored on it. So here you go. And I actually went to school and learned about mental health, about trauma, and domestic violence. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And then if you guys want to check out our books, they will be posted in the link as well. And then, Jenn, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, hey, my name is Jenn. A little bit about my story. I lost a sister to domestic violence. Um, when I was about 11 years old, I found out that the man that was raising me was not my biological father. I also found out that my biological father had two other children from his previous marriage. And so I had two older half siblings. At 16, I found photos of my dad and my siblings, an older brother and an older sister who obviously I did not know about growing up. I began searching for them using MySpace back in the day before Facebook was popular, before it
I
was even
remember
created.
those days.
So 3 years later, in November 2006, I found my sister's memorial MySpace page that my brother had created. Of course, I didn't know at the time that it was her. And so I didn't know how she had passed away or anything. Um, the weekend after Thanksgiving, I had went to meet my brother. He only lived about an hour and a half from me, which was really a small world. Um, and so he had to tell me how my sister passed away from a domestic violence relationship. And she was only 24 years old. And on the way home from meeting my brother called our father to tell him that I had found them. So that was a big shock to my dad, obviously, who I had not seen since I was about 2. Um, and then it took me a couple of years to get the courage to go and meet our father because I was kind of dealing with that whole thing. How do you find a sibling and find out that they're gone? And not only that they're gone, but they're gone to such a horrific um, situation. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that's kind of my little story.
Thank you guys both much for sharing. Um, and then kind of just to touch a little bit on my background with domestic violence. I am a huge advocate for domestic violence. I'm currently working on a survival guide for those that are in domestic violence or family violence situations. And then I was a peer counselor. I led DV support groups, and I lived through a domestic violence relationship myself. And I've had family that also lived through domestic violence relationships. So it's something that's very close to my heart. Um, when you're looking at domestic violence, and you two definitely jump in, there's multiple types of domestic violence. You have physical, psychological, emotional. I think they categorize stalking now. There's digital, financial. So it's not just physical abuse. There's so much more to domestic violence. And then to kind of touch on some things, because you get a lot of people saying, why don't they just leave? It's not that easy. You have what you call the cycle of violence. And then within that cycle of violence, you have trauma bonding. And that cycle of violence, the best way and easiest way to describe it for you guys is, you know, you have your good phase, everything's good, and then tension builds, and then there's an explosion, and that's where the abuse happens. And then after that, it's I'm sorry. A lot of times, I know for myself, my spouse always bought me flowers. It took me a minute when my fiance started buying flowers because I'm like, what'd you do? Like it it's hard. I know someone that their spouse always bought expensive jewelry. Um, or there's a lot of just I'm sorry's. And so that's kind of like your cycle. And then once things are okay again, that tension builds and it just keeps repeating itself. And then that trauma bond is what kind of keeps you in that relationship until you break it. And it does take quite a few times to leave that relationship. I know for myself, I left 5 times before I actually left the 6th time. And so that trauma bond is just that connection you have with that person. It's basically, Lexi, how would you describe it? Like an easy way to describe it.
So my big thing that you keep saying trauma bond and what like keeps you, I would say love bombing too, because mine
Yes.
was so much, I went back many times, even after I was choked. Um, and it would always be big gifts, like technology gifts, like a tablet or an Apple Watch or I love you, it was a mistake, all the things. So yes, when you're in that repeated cycle, and not only that, I feel like you keep having hope. You keep
Mm-hmm.
having hope that their good side is going to be there the entire time. You're going to keep having hope that, oh, they're doing good. They're treating me right. Oh, they're celebrating me. Um, and so I think that's where the shift is really challenging because you're like, oh, I have this hope, and then all of a sudden they explode again. Okay, are they gonna explode again, or are they finally gonna learn from their mistake? And I feel like with narcissism, they don't.
No, I feel like with that, there's a lot of I'm going to change and then it's okay for a minute and then it just doesn't change. I recently just seen that with one of my friends. Like, her spouse is always like, I'm going to change, I'm going to change. And then he's okay for a minute. And then it's the same thing over and over again. And so and I think too, looking at it when we're looking at family violence, because there's interpartner violence with your spouse, but then you have family violence with like parents, siblings, that kind of falls, you still have the same thing. I know for myself, when it comes to one of my family members, we have a falling out, and then we're okay, and then it just keeps repeating itself. And then it's the way I describe it, it's like mourning the loss of someone that's not there because you so desperately want that relationship with your family member, and it's just not possible. You guys are just not meant to be. It's too toxic. And family relationships are like that. I've had friendships like that too. So, Jen, is there anything you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, so I've also had friends who have been in domestic violence relationships. I showed up at one of my best friend's houses in the middle of the night with a baseball bat because she called me saying that he had, abused her. And I think also, looking at the domestic violence thing, um, my my sister, I we believe from what her family had told me that she didn't see it coming. She obviously wanted to um try to work things out with him because all of her exes, I mean, they all showed up at her memorial service. She had left all these relationships on good terms as friends. So I think that that was also part of I'd hate to say it like that, but part of the downfall of, trying to leave a relationship and then the person snapping. Um, I think that that's something. And then also when I started to really look into this, because I had never dealt with something like that before,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. I mean, my mother had been in relationships that were not great, that were, verbally and emotionally abusive, but nothing really physical. So the fact that my sister passed away from that situation, I ended up really researching it and looking into it and realizing, wow, women, it takes women an average of at least 7 to 10 times before they leave that relationship. But those are things that I
Mhm.
didn't know before. And so I really put myself into that situation and began to research it and really learn about domestic violence and started to realize these other things going on in my life and in my family dynamics and things like that that really just opened my eyes up to it. So yeah, it was not the best situation of um, trying to learn about that because I was hit with it basically over the head with that. But
Mhm.
it really helped and really opened my eyes. So that's good in a way.
There's a lot of really, I want to say sad, but really traumatic domestic violence stories out there. And I want to make this disclaimer as well before we jump into questions for these two. Domestic violence isn't just specified to one gender, men also experience domestic violence. So just keep that in mind as well when we do go through these questions. To start off, just for the both of you, to kind of start the conversation, what's the difference between being loved and being emotionally attached to someone?
So, being attached to someone, I would say, is like, okay, you can love someone and be there for them, and attachment is when you feel like you can't leave, but like your body tenses. Your body just knows.
Mm-hmm.
Your body knows. Like when they come for you and they want to kiss you, if you love them, you're going to want to kiss them. But when your body tenses up and you just feel so uncomfortable and you don't want to be kissed, that's an attachment that you've grown over because you've been with them for so long. Or even in a short amount of time, it can happen. Um, your body knows for sure. I think that's partly why a lot of people start having like health issues. If you look, it's a lot of people who get like PTSD from trauma from abuse.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of that trauma and that PTSD, when we store things in our body, they start to look like physical symptoms as well. And that's why you'll see a lot of people that are in abusive relationships or just coming out of abusive relationships, they have a handful of health problems. And when their nervous system is finally able to calm down, then things start becoming more known. Jen, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Um, I I believe I can see that in different things that I've dealt with my mom and her relationships. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Also seeing women, it kind of opened my eyes up to women going through it. But then I started looking at my mom and her relationships as well, and she was like that towards her, significant others. And so I really started to see, like you were saying, that men can also be abused, which is really sad because when they are, society looks at it differently, and
Yes.
it's like, well, you're a man, deal with it, and that's men are just as capable of being um, abused as women are. So yeah.
No, I definitely agree. And I think for myself, when I'm looking at being loved and being emotionally attached to someone, I think back to my abusive relationship. And even though I was being abused in many different ways, I was so attached to this person, it literally made me go crazy. Like, I was like, where are you? I want to be with you 24/7. Even though you hurt me, I still want to be around you. Compared to now with my fiance, I get excited when he gets home from work, but he can go do his own thing. And I'm not like, what's he doing? Where's he at? Why am I not with him? Like, you can see the difference between unhealthy and healthy. We're going to jump into some questions. I'm going to start off with Jen.
I have
Um,
a question real quick. I have a
yeah.
question. Well, more of a statement. I wanted to say this because you're just talking about love and attachment and it made me think of this. I think a lot of people, and I think this is where the big struggle is just you were talking and I was thinking about it. Like we get loved and attached to these people, and you say you just know, but the outside doesn't always know. A majority of the time, they don't. And so when you finally come clean, that's another reason why you stay in that cycle because it's so hard to be like, yep, this happened to me. Oh, no, it couldn't. That's my son. That's my brother. He would never do that. I think that's a big problem of why we keep staying attached and staying in that cycle as well.
No, I agree. A lot of people are very judgmental and they're like, I don't see that happening. I just watched a documentary and it's not necessarily domestic violence, but it is violence. These kids were inappropriately touched by their dad, and their mom came on this doc and started saying her son wouldn't do that, and like didn't even believe these kids. And they like barricaded themselves in this room. They lived in Utah. Um, and it was just really crazy that like this mom was here advocating for her son that was being charged with like these serious allegations, and health and welfare found them like true. And it's so heartbreaking that people aren't believed, especially when they come out of domestic violence relationships. And I feel like it's even harder for men to come out and be like, hey, this person abused me, because there's a lot of judgment towards them as well. um but Jen, so how did losing your sister to DV change your understanding of relationships and safety?
So let's just put it this way. I made an absolute deal with myself. I would never allow myself to get into a relationship with anyone who dared to control or abuse me in any way, which is easier said than done, right? Because as
Mm-hmm.
women, that's just, it happens. And then we don't realize it until it's too late. Um, my closest friends all knew that I didn't want to date anybody after this happened. Um, my stepdad, oh my gosh, my stepdad even asked me one time if I was gay because I was not in a relationship in my 20s. Because I found out that my sister had passed away when I was 19. And I didn't get into my first relationship until I was later in my 20s. And I was just kind of taken aback by it. And he's like, well, you know, women in their 20s, they're out dating and partying and this and that. And I didn't want to do any of those things. I wanted to just, it made me open my eyes to the fact that I wanted to live my life and not be in a relationship. I wasn't fearful of being in a relationship. If it happened, it happened, right? But it just made me think, okay, I don't want that to happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as seeing other people around me, um, my friends, one of my best friends, like I said, was in an abusive relationship. As far as safety, um, I just became more aware of the relationships of my friends and the people around me and what kind of dynamics that they were having. It almost made me like hyper aware, if that makes any sense,
That makes
um,
sense.
of just like things going on. And I could almost pinpoint it and say, okay, that relationship is not going to work out. Of course, I'm going to support my friend, but I could see the flags, and it was really strange because like I didn't know my sister before she had passed away, but the more and more I started to read and realize these things, I could see it in other people.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Alexis, what are some signs of trauma bonding people don't recognize?
Oh goodness. There's a lot of them. Um, okay, the first one that I noticed is when they're really quick to be like, I love you, and they just met you. Let's get married. I want to propose. I'm so in love with you, and I just can't see my life without anybody else. Um,
That's a good one.
rushing. Rushing like is a huge one for me. Some other ones that I have witnessed is oh goodness. There's so many. There's just so many. I wrote my questions down and I don't have them all organized. My brain is,
It's okay. My brain's always like
sorry.
chaos.
Um, I don't know. That's like the big one. That's the big one for me is when they're like trying to rush to keep you around. And also when they try to rush to keep you around, but also they don't really let you go see your family.
The isolation.
Yes. That was a huge one. Yes. Yep.
I think those points you made are really important because I I've got to stop watching documentaries, guys.
I
I just
can't
watched
handle them. They're just too triggering for me at this point. I just can't. They just break my heart.
they're so sad. Alec says I take him out of his happy bubble because I watch true crime docs and he likes Disney movies and happy things.
Those are two opposites.
And then there's me who's like watching murder docs and SVU all the time. But I was gonna say there was this girl and she fell in love with this guy, and within a month, 30 days, he proposed and they were gonna get married. And then he came clean to her that he murdered someone. And then she still stuck around, but helped law enforcement like arrest him, but like still stayed like with him. And it just that trauma bond. And like she also bonded to his brother. And so there's just three of them like living their life. Like it was insane. I was like, domestic violence. I was like, and then he wasn't, you add in alcohol and drugs to the mix and it just gets worse. So I do agree. Like, that's one of the first signs is the I love you, which I should have known because my spouse and I had only been dating for about a month. And Lexi actually went shopping with him and he bought me a bracelet that said I love you and gave it to me for Christmas. And it was
When you're
within,
young, you don't know any better.
I know. And so he told me he loved me within maybe it had to have been less than a month because I think we started dating like right after Thanksgiving. So, or like right before Thanksgiving. So it was like within a month. He goes like, "I love you," and it tripped me out because he got down on one knee to give it to me, and I was like, "That's kind of weird," but that should have been a red flag. So I do agree with you, Lexi, on that one. Jen, what did emotional safety look like to you growing up?
Oh, so we talked about the different types of domestic violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's also the violence within your own family.
Yes.
So I grew up with a very narcissistic mother. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of hinted at that by the relationships and things that I had mentioned before, but I did not have emotional safety. My mother was verbally and emotionally abusive, just like you would be in a relationship, except that's your mother.
Mm-hmm.
They say your mom is supposed to be your best friend and the only person, the one person that you could always go to. But it was not the case for me. When I was 24, I told my mom about some abuse that had happened to me as a child, and her reaction was not what I thought it would be. Let's just say she began screaming at me, calling me all kinds of names, calling me a liar. I mean, that was not the worst of it. And kicked me out of the house. um, I no longer have a relationship with her because it became so incredibly toxic that I felt like I was leaving a relationship because it was the same kind of things. It was the guilt trips and the the things that she would say was like I was almost in a relationship, and no parent should ever turn their back on their child. I mean, I get it if, the person commits a murder or something and you're just like, I want nothing to do with this. But for somebody to have suffered abuse as a child and for the parent to turn their back on the child because of their decision making that put the child in that position as a kid. And the way that she acted was so much like domestic violence relationships, because she would do that. She would, try to win me over, would try to guilt trip, would try to make me feel bad about myself, and I said to myself, this is happening to me in a whole different way. And I said to myself, I don't want any part of this. I will not allow her to be in my life, because how does a parent do that to you? That's your parent. That's
Mhm.
They're the adult in the relationship. And and I started having flashbacks to my sister passing away. And I was 24 when it happened, when my mom turned her back on me, and my sister was 24 when she passed away. So it totally triggered me in that way. Um, and so I've not gone back. And I had tried, because we tried to give them so many chances,
Mhm.
being in a relationship as well. We tried to make excuses. I was making excuses for her left and right. I was just like, maybe she just needs some time to process it. But it didn't change. She continued to break down that wall. And then as soon as I let my guard down, it was playing the games all over again, and the manipulation tactics. And I realized the correlation between narcissism and being in a domestic violence relationship, but in a different dynamic, in a different way.
And just to like touch on that, because emotional safety, like as a kid, you didn't really have. Do you feel like you have emotional safety now in, your relationship and where you're at in life?
Mm-hmm.
That's good. I'm glad you were able to find that.
Yeah.
Um, Alexis, what are the most dangerous moments in an abusive relationship that people should be aware of?
Can I stem kind of what you asked, Jen? Kind of, because I
Yeah,
will kind of stem into the dangerous thing with people. Okay.
absolutely.
So we talked about emotional safety, and I brought about a flashback, a trigger warning that I honestly forgot about. It's kind of crazy how your brains can compartmentalize and just put things in the back and the past. So,
Hmm.
um, obviously, Desiree, you know about my childhood,
Yes.
and it
For
was not a great childhood. I
For
love my
people that don't know, Alexis and I practically grew up together. She's like my sister. So we met in seventh grade.
I pretty much lived at Desiree's house like all the time. Let's be real.
Yeah.
um, so I just want to stem from emotional safety because it impacted my choices as an adult. I feel like not always, but a majority of the time when people get in a domestic relationship and they get in these dangerous relationships with people and they don't even recognize it because they lived it as a child. You grew up in a childhood with drugs, abuse, mental health. Um, like when you grow up around people who have either BPD, borderline personality, or bipolar, um, and they have a hard time and they're just on a roller coaster, it affects the people around them. Doesn't
Hmm.
mean they intend to do that, but it happens. And so when you stem from growing up and dealing with that, and then you thinking it's normal and that it's okay, it's acceptable, you grew up around people fighting, you grew up around people cheating on each other, um, then you think, oh, this is normal. It's okay to fight. It's okay to scream. It's normal. It is normal for me to be in this relationship. It's normal for him to be screaming at me. What do you mean this is abusive? How is this abuse? This isn't abuse. I mean, I grew up seeing people scream at each other all the time.
Hmm.
Or um, I'm a big believer of God. I grew up, my grandfather's a pastor,
Hmm.
and I was with someone who believed in God. Their family was all about God. And I will never forget being told this by someone and them saying, well, you have to submit. That's what the Bible says. You have to submit to them. It's not rape. It's not considered rape. It
Sorry.
is rape. Doesn't matter whether you're married or just in a relationship with someone. In that moment, if they tell you no, that means no. Just
Yes.
because you're with that person does not mean that you have to say yes every time. If you say no in that moment, that means no, not right now. And then when you force upon themselves, you are raping. And I know for a long time some states didn't consider it rape. Um, and that was really sad because it is. It is. And I look back and I had a flashback when I was younger, and not a lot of people know this, and I can't believe I'm going to even share this. Um, there was two girl neighbors. I was really young, and I was sexually assaulted by them. And I never really said anything to anyone. I just kind of like brushed it off. I was like, I'm just gonna let this go. Um, I dealt with being physically abused growing up. And with that all said and done, like I forgive. I really do. And I've worked on these relationships really hard because I believe in God and I've been praying to Him for forgiveness and I love them. But it doesn't mean it didn't affect me. It did affect me. And the only reason why I'm sharing it now is not to talk negatively about these people, and that's why I'm not being specific on people,
Mm-hmm.
is literally to help other people because I worked at Youth Works, which is a place for human trafficking teens
Mm-hmm.
and teens that are leaving homes because they are abused. And I've done foster care. I was a foster care mom, and I had kids that were I had teenagers living in my home that went through either some sort of abuse in some sort of way, and then thinking that it is normal, and watching them and having to teach them, like, no, that's not normal. Why are you going for this person when you know they're unsafe? Like, they have backgrounds of not being safe, legally even. So I feel like when you are raised in those situations, you don't even notice those dangerous flags. You just don't. Um, Yeah. Sorry, I lost track. Repeat that question one more time, though. I think that's pretty
You're
much
okay. What are the most dangerous moments in an abusive relationship that people should be aware of? So basically, like, what is kind of like that moment that you realize, like, this is going to get worse than what it is? I got to go.
when I got choked out. When I
I
got
think,
choked out. And the lies. And I did not know and took a lot of years to learn. Because I grew up around people who did drugs. So
mm-hmm.
I can't tell the difference. I just can't. So knowing that that stemmed from some of the abuse, it's not an excuse. You make a choice to take those drugs, but knowing that, like, really, like, has really opened my eyes and made me start understanding some of the things that happened to me. But there was some crazy things that were said, and I'm just like, what? Um, so it was really hard for me to distinguish that. And I feel like unless you're in it, you don't understand. When you're on the outskirts, like if I see you, for an example, Desiree with somebody else, not Alec, we're not going to use Alec as an example, he's a great guy, but I see you with somebody else, and I see they're being abusive to you, I will be able to tell and I'll be able to help you. But in that moment, you're like, oh, I'm so in love with him. What are you talking about? No, he's not. And then you're going to get
You're
defensive and you're going to get mad at
blinded.
me. You even block
Mm-hmm.
me and cut me out. You know what I'm saying? So then you don't even know it. And then people get so sick and tired of it. So instead of continuing to support you and try to help and be there as much as you can, people give up on you. You're on your own. You're by yourself.
Yes.
And then
I,
when you're by yourself and people give up on you, whether it's family, friends, anybody, then you feel like you're stuck. Then you have to be there. Like I lived somewhere where I wasn't near anybody.
mm-hmm.
So then you're like, oh, well, I guess I got to stay in this situation.
I
Can't be
mean,
left.
that's so similar. It sends me back because unfortunately, a lot of people I know have been in abusive relationships. I have a friend that just got out of one, and like Alec doesn't. He, for example, he's one of those that you have to explain to him because he doesn't understand. He's like, well, why don't you just leave? And I'm like, it's not that easy. Like you don't understand. And it stems back to I had a family member, and I'm sure Lexi will figure out who this is, but they've been in nothing but abusive relationships. And their first abusive partner, um, moved them all the way out to Montana and isolated them from family because once family moved back to where they were, now they had to be away from everybody else. And this person gained a lot of weight, got really depressed, like eventually finally like left and came back home. And then abuse is all they knew. So their next relationship was even worse. And then there was a child that got involved. And that person was very violent. That person also threatened to kill me. It was not, I'm going to charm the family. It was like, I'm going to harm the person that's around the other person. And so just seeing it, like, and I'm like, well, at the time, even though I had just gotten out of my abusive relationship not too long before, I was like, well, why don't you just take your child and go? And I realized, like, after I got out of mine and started doing research and learning and becoming an advocate, it's not that easy.
Especially with children involved.
Yes. Um, and so that's where I want to step in and say, if you have a domestic violence facility close by you, seek help if you can, because they can safety plan with you. And I think a safety plan is a really important thing to help
Safety plan
you
is huge. You have to
get
have a
out.
safety plan.
Yes. Because you can't just leave, especially if they're very, very violent. You have to have a plan. Um, and that brings me back to like, too, like everyone, like the world was swept by the whole Gabby Petito story. Like she was labeled the aggressor, and law enforcement really didn't help her. And then now
Because sometimes
there's,
it's hard to even know. Like you're around people
well,
and I don't even know that happened to them. Like I know someone who was trafficked and it was under my nose and I had no idea.
yeah. And then, so if those of you don't know, I'm from California. I'm from Central California, and I used to work domestic violence with Stockton, California. And there was a police officer, and I will never forget him because he used to bring some of the kids to our facility. But his name was Officer Jimmy In, and people don't realize that the domestic violence situation is one of the most dangerous situations for a police officer to go out to, and he ended up being shot and killed from a domestic violence call. So, like, I cannot stress this enough. If you are trying to leave, please seek help and get a safety plan. It is very dangerous to just try and leave on your own.
Open your own bank account. They'll swipe all the money. You want to have your
Yes,
own bank account without them knowing and put the funds away and have a plan in place where they do not know to leave.
yes.
I know sometimes that can be hard if you do have kids involved, but you need to seriously get on a protection order right away when you have that plan. Like if you have money saved, go get that protection order for you and your kids and go.
And most of the time, if you do reach out to a domestic violence facility, they will help you safety plan all this and how to do all of this. And they can even help you file for your protection order. They can help you
Write it.
advocate for yourself. Like they are your support system. Um,
They'll
but
even
that's
go to court with you.
yes, that's another big thing. Um, Also, a lot of them too, if you're experiencing family violence, like you know how Jen has spoke upon, they also offer, a lot of them offer family violence services, um, and they'll be able to help you advocate as well. But to jump off of that, Jen, what do you wish more people understood about domestic violence situations from a family member's perspective?
So I'll just jump off of what y'all were saying about the
Mm-hmm.
safety plan,
Yes.
because in my sister's situation, um, her cousin and I talked, and they trusted my sister to be able to leave the situation. And I think everybody's guilt around that they didn't, it's so hard to talk about that because it's like they could see that he was trying to isolate her. But my sister was from my understanding, my sister was very feisty and was not, she kind of pushed back against that. Um, and, but the fact that whatever happened that night, that she obviously trusted that he wouldn't do anything or whatever it was. After she passed away, um, the he took her car, ended up actually up here in the Central Valley, because it happened in the Bay Area, and he was trying to run the police over. And as you were saying, how scary it is for a police officer to go into that situation because they had to open fire on him. He was trying to run them over with her car, and he wasn't going down without a fight. He knew what he had done, and so to put the police officers, I mean, he ran over a police officer, put him in the hospital. He survived, um, but yeah, that situation, and I actually contacted the police officer who was involved in that, and let them know that I thank them for their service as much as that kind of thing is not really open, but it helped me in a way, because they were there when he lost his life a couple days later. And the whole um, growing up with parents fighting and things like that, I grew up with that, and I thought it was normal. My mom and my stepdad fought all the time, and that's actually how I found out that my stepdad was not my dad. Was during a fight. They just let it come out with me standing there. Um, so the as far as what I wish people would understand about domestic violence is exactly what you all were saying, is that it's not easy to leave a situation. You think, you know, you think the person is not going to harm you. You think you can just leave whenever, oh, I'll leave when he's at work or whatever it is, right? Um, but also when you lose somebody to anything traumatic, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be domestic violence. It could, the person could have died from some other reason. Society looks at the parents and the parent's loss, which I get because no parent should ever have to lose a child, ever. It happens, and everybody's focus goes on the parents. But when those people leave behind siblings, cousins, nieces, nephews, and those people are having to pick up the pieces. I know that when my sister passed away, I found my brother, like I said, 2 months later. So this was fresh when I found my brother. And I look at it now going, if I had known all the details and realized that memorial MySpace page that I had found was indeed my sister, would I have contacted my brother? Would I have waited, longer? Because it had just happened. So getting to know my dad was like kind of getting to know a different version of him because he had just lost one of his children. And I could see, looking back at it now, at the time, I wasn't aware. But looking back at it now, I could see that my dad was giving up on his health. He stopped caring. He started having heart attacks, and things go wrong with his health. And so I think that essentially losing a huge piece of our parents as well, and that dynamic in the family completely changing, is something that people don't understand. I think that the siblings are either pushed aside through the parents' grief. Like, I know from just seeing it, I don't have proof to this, but seeing it in my own opinion, that when I went to my brother's mom's house for the first time, that she was completely withdrawn and disappeared to her room, and I didn't see her but maybe one time the entire night. So, and he had a younger sister who was a minor at the time. So I could see what that did to her and how it changed her relationships with her kids, right? And then there's, you know, there's the other version of that, that the parents might become, even more of like a helicopter parent and more protective of their kids because of that, of what had happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I could see, that kind of thing. Like my dad, in Arizona, you could ride in the back of a pickup truck without a seatbelt and everything. I think it's still legal in Arizona, but
Really?
that's where my dad lived. And at the time I was like, oh, he lived off of like off of like a dirt road, like a good
Mm-hmm.
quarter mile or something off this dirt road. And I was like, just let me sit in the back of the truck until we get to the end of the road. And my dad was like, no. And I'm like, I'm an adult. But it made my dad like even more protective. And my dad was just like, no, because I think that he wanted to go into protective dad mode. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Even though he hadn't been in my life since I was 2 years old. So I could kind of see little things looking back at it now going, oh, you know, but my dad didn't have the best relationship with my brother. So I could also see my dad's guilt around that as well. And so looking at it from the siblings' point of view, and I'm not trying to say that to sound selfish, but the parents are not the only ones affected by it
Mm-hmm.
and who have to grieve and go through it. And I don't think that society takes a minute and says, well, wait, how is the family as a whole?
I appreciate
Because
you saying that.
the
That's
the
true.
Yes,
parents do change. It changes the parent.
It
I think
does.
I think that points out to not just, traumatic situations that happen to your family, but also just those that lose people in general. Like just, people passing away from health problems. They focus on that main person, instead of looking at the family as a whole. Because I've seen my family members pass away, and yeah, it affects, that main person that stood next to them, but it also has an impact on all of us. So, like for instance, when my papa passed away, not only did it affect my nana and my mom, but then you have Lexi and I as well, who were also affected because Lexi and I were there the night before he passed away. And then when he passed away, we went into the room. We went back to the hospital because her and I were at home. And Lexi was a big part of that too. And so was I. But it's like, I'm still traumatized by it. And I'm 29 years old, and this happened when we were in high school. And I held a lot of regrets because I don't talk about it like publicly, but he when he was alive, he wanted to be resuscitated, and then it got switched to a DNR, and so I lived with that for a long time with a lot of hate and unforgiveness. And so the fact that you said what you said, Jen, like it does affect other people in the family. I've lost a lot of people in my life, and each death has affected me in a different way. I think my trauma growing up was everyone kept dying. And so it just teaches you to appreciate life a little bit more. Um, and that's
And
just like my perspective.
I also just really want people to understand that if you even suspect that something is wrong, and the
Mm-hmm.
person, whether it be male or female,
Mm-hmm.
okay, because women are just as capable of violence as men, hands down,
100%.
hands down.
I
I've
have a
seen it
male
happen.
friend that was recently abused by his ex girlfriend.
And I
So,
really, my whole thing is losing my sister. I really want people to get that help.
Mm-hmm.
Get the help to get out. Don't just try to get out alone. Like you said, come up with a safety plan, have your family there, call the police for protection. But we get scared. We get worried that
Mm-hmm.
something's going to happen, that, oh, the person's going to come for me or whatever it is. And when I was a child, I didn't say anything about the abuse that I was going through to my mom because my mom sat me down with my stepdad and his best friend, who was also friends with my abuser. My stepdad's best friend has a big mouth. Okay. And I knew that as a kid. I was well aware. I was old enough when the abuse happened to know. And when my mom sat me down in front of my stepdad and his best friend, who was, like I said, also friends with this guy, I knew it was going to get back to him. And he had threatened me. And it's kind of you can see that child abuse and things in abusive relationships as well. Because I knew, I was smart enough to know that if I said, yes, this happened, that the threats that he had made towards me, I didn't know if he was going to actually go through with them.
But you're made to believe that he's going to go
Right.
through with
And
them.
as a child, you're manipulated, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. So you also, in an abusive relationship, you're manipulated in that way. And so I didn't say anything. And I just kind of hoped that his threats were, not going to be true, or that my mom would suspect that something actually did happen and would not let me be around that person anymore, which ended up being the case, thankfully. But by then it was too late. And so when I told her what had happened to me, she couldn't process it, and the reaction that she had. And so
Mm-hmm.
I to this day, I still feel isolated by my own family because my family believed my mom. you know
Yes, Lexi.
This is teacher mode. Teacher mode. Can you tell me? So there's two things I want to add that Jen said. First and foremost, Jen, thank you because as a mom, I did have a stillbirth. I did lose a daughter. And at the time, my other daughter was 2.5. And they always said, "Oh, she's young. She won't remember. It won't affect her." And I definitely went into helicopter mom. Like even with my son, my rainbow baby, and it still affects her. It does affect you. It doesn't matter how old you are. You still
Mm-hmm.
get affected by it. Like it was her sister. Um, and to lean back, you said your mom didn't believe you and when all that. So I know someone where the husband molested the kids and the wife, the mom, did not want to believe the kids, okay, and stayed married to this person, finally got caught with child porn, went and did time. One kid was still minor, the other ones were grown, maybe two were minor, um, and they got remarried. So when you're teaching about forgiveness and you're teaching about God, I feel like sometimes even in the church, like I know the church, there was pastor's son molested. So what really affects me is how many churches are like corrupt or how many people are bringing in Jesus into this. And then you get people who don't want to believe in Jesus because in church, you're getting rapes. You're being taught that it's not raped because you're with that person and you're committed to them in God's eyes and you must submit to your husbands. And they're taking the Bible and they're rewording it to their advantage. And then when you have parents who you're going to and you're like, hello, you're supposed to be protecting me. I understand that's your spouse. Why are you protecting them over your child when they're hurting them? That's wrong. And then
The
they go in the denial mode and they don't want to believe it.
Lexi, I don't know if you know, but I know someone that went to church with us growing up, and her brother was molesting her, and he was working at the church. And she came out as an adult and told the church, and they didn't believe her. They didn't do
The
anything.
church.
They never called her back.
This
Like,
was the pastor's son, even, and I'm just like,
yeah,
what?
I'm a
Yeah.
big, and I talked about this on my first podcast. I believe in God. I don't believe in churches. And I think that's because I've seen so much corruption inside of churches that
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to listen to the service and leave it at that. My relationship is between me and who I believe in. And so there is a lot of dark
That's why I don't believe in
corruption.
religion. I don't believe in religion. That's
Yeah.
exactly why.
Yeah. There's a lot of corruption inside of churches. And they're also really greedy. I've found so many churches that are greedy. My
The one
dad,
that we used to go to that's gotten really big.
yeah. And then growing up, I even went to like a small church when we lived in Outwater, and my dad was on the board. And that's why he stopped going to church because it was the most corrupt thing that he had ever witnessed. And that's why he stopped going to church.
Yeah, that's sad. But the
And
thing is church, not all churches are like that. But then they're all stereotypes like that, which is just awful because,
mhm,
yeah.
yeah. Um, thank you both for sharing. I really appreciate it. Um, Lexi, real quick, what is something survivors wish people understood instead of judging them?
As a survivor, I wish people would understand that we don't, yeah, we chose that person, right? We chose that partner, but we didn't choose the choices that they made. And to be there. Be there to support. Don't just give up on them. Don't just like block them and cut them out of your life because it really is hurtful and it causes a lot of pain to them because then they feel like they're alone and like it's their fault. And it is not your fault. What happened to you is not your fault, whether it's from a friend, a parent, a spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, anything like that. It is not your fault. That should have never happened to you. There's no excuse. Whether they say, well, I have this mental health illness or I did drugs or this or that, it's not an excuse. They should never have done that. If they were going down that rabbit hole, they should have went and got help and been like, hey, I'm not healthy right now. I need to step away and work on myself.
I definitely agree. Um, Jen, how did growing up with emotional or mental abuse shape your understanding of love?
So it made me believe love came with conditions. Your parents are supposed to love you unconditionally. My mom was the queen of using guilt and manipulation tactics to control me and everyone else around her, including my family. It made me have some trust issues in any relationship or friendship. It also made me feel uncomfortable when anyone would want to be loving towards me or compliment me. I hate it, and I still hate being complimented, but I'm I'm learning to get better about it. That's like my one thing I'm really trying. Um, and it made me have hyper independence, believing that I could rely on only myself. And I think that it's just really important to understand that these things stem from childhood trauma, and I'm trying to work through it. I'm not perfect. We're not perfect as people, but we're trying our best every day to deal with what we've been through. And it's just important to let people know, just be supportive. And if you can't, then walk away. And I've had to walk away from people because they've not been supportive. And it's almost like you feel like you're letting down like this brick wall. And then it's like as soon as you let this brick wall down, it's people come right, you know, take advantage or turn their backs on you or whatever it is. And so I that's something that I grew up with, that understanding was that if I let that brick wall down, I was going to get hurt. So I have to try to, on the daily, to trust people. And it's really hard because you can't trust everybody. And that's the mindset when you're abused. and you come out of an abusive relationship, like you're saying, you know, oh, he bought me flowers. What does that mean? You know, you automatically start spinning that in your wheels, and you start thinking in your mind, and you have to reel yourself back and ask yourself those questions.
No, I agree. I had to like retrain my brain because I correlated flowers with like bad things. And so then I just told like Alec, I was like, I don't like flowers. And then I had to take a step back and I'm like, you know what? I do like to get flowers, but not because you did something wrong. Like because you love me and you want to buy me flowers. Like,
And I think that's
Because you
what people,
care.
yeah, and I think that that's what people don't understand is that you have to, it rewires our brains. And people
yes.
go, well, why don't you like those things? Why don't you accept compliments? You know, why are
Drama.
you getting upset when we compliment you? Well, I wonder why.
Yep.
Well, and Desiree, you said something earlier about how someone went to another, like it's really easy to cycle to go to another abusive relationship, another abusive relationship. And I think the biggest factor that I've noticed is because it's hard to distinguish between red flags and triggers.
Mm-hmm. Also, too, sometimes that's all you know.
Mm-hmm. And that's
And
what you're comfortable with.
mhm. I do think though, I've witnessed it with some people I know. They get out of that cycle of abusive relationships, but then they have abusive traits that they picked
Like
up from
reactive
their
abuse.
abuser. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
reactive abuse. They've picked up those traits from
100%.
their abuser. Um, Lexi, while we're talking about this, and this is my last question before we get to the end. Why can't emotional or psychological abuse sometimes be harder to identify than physical abuse?
Well, for my experiences that I've witnessed and seen from other people, I think it's because people go and say, oh, it was a joke. When someone's belittling you and putting you down and making jokes, it's not jokes, that is emotional mental abuse.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not supporting you and they're making fun of it or any rude remark and they're trying to claim it as a joke, I think that's sometimes harder to distinguish because they're like, oh, well, I thought it was funny. Okay, well, just because you think it's funny doesn't mean it was funny. It was actually rude and hurtful.
Yes.
So I think that's the biggest factor is why it's so hard. And you're not leaving marks that are physically that you can see. Um, it's all they people are like, well, it's just in your brain, it's fine. It sticks and stones may break your bones, but words never
Well,
hurt me. Did I say that? Words will hurt you. Say. So that's what I'm saying.
dad
Like,
has that mentality.
right, exactly. And words do hurt. They do.
Yes.
And it does like and then you're right, reactive abuse. I think it is really hard. I think when you're in an abusive relationship, you think it's normal. So then you character those traits into other relationships. And that's why it's so, 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 so important to heal beforehand, before you rush.
Yes.
Be impulsive. And that's partly why I even wrote the journal was to help people to try and journal through their thoughts and feelings and process through everything before they just jump head first and go into another relationship.
And I mean, to touch off that, so I had, I mean, between my abusive relationship and Alec, there was a few like side relationships there. But I think when I got with Alec a few years later, I still had to retrain my brain with some things because I would instantly like start fighting
The fight or
or
flight mode.
yeah, and he'd be like, I'm not trying to like fight or argue, like I'm just trying to have a conversation. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't need to protect myself, like I can be vulnerable. And I had to constantly be like rewire my brain, like why isn't he texting me back, like if I didn't text back, like he'd get really mad. And so it was just kind of retraining my brain to be like, this is healthy, it's okay, like you can breathe. And it took me, I want to say, about 8 months into our relationship to finally realize, like, okay, he's not gonna abuse you. Like, it's
This is
gonna
a
be,
safe relationship.
yeah, like, because I had my guard up because I knew what it was like. Like, all those little flings were not exactly the healthiest either. And so to have my first healthy relationship, I had to rewire my brain. And tell myself that it's okay. I don't need to like protect myself because he's not gonna hurt me. Like, it'll be okay. Like, he's not gonna hit me. Like, he's not gonna belittle me. I don't have to fight. Like, and my nervous system, we've been together almost 3 years. I can't remember. I think it's like 3 years. We've been together for a while, but my body is just now starting. Like, my nervous system has finally just like went back to
Calming
normal.
down.
And
That's
so
good.
now I'm able to like heal through I have like random memories. Like you said, like it triggers things.
Flashback, things that
Yeah.
something's
And I'm all like, I didn't know
oh,
this
I forgot
happened.
about
I
that.
don't remember. Like, and then I made the bad decision after my abusive relationship to get into drugs. So then I really messed up my brain. And so remembering those things too, like now my nervous system's okay, but like my brain is just,
So I just have to say I'm so proud of you.
thanks.
I'm really proud of you. It's really hard when you're addicted to something. Addiction is really hard. It is not easy. And when you go through these things, you feel like you just want to numb yourself and you don't choose drugs and alcohol. It will suppress it in the moment. It will not actually bring you healing. So I'm
And
proud
it'll
of you.
heighten a lot of trauma.
Yes.
I have stories I'm not going to share, but I have stories that can like explain that I went from that abusive relationship. I didn't want to heal. I didn't want to feel my feelings. And then I went into something that just numbed it all. And then it created more problems. So don't do drugs or drink.
Drugs make you not you who you really
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. Don't numb yourself to get through the trauma that is occurring. Also, when you're in a domestic violence relationship and then you mix alcohol and drugs, it heightens the abuse and it makes it a lot worse on both ends. Whether,
Or a man or a woman.
yeah. So, and then kind of like, I really like asking this question. If you guys don't want to answer it, you don't have to, but kind of like a closing question for each of you. What advice would you give to your younger self or anyone younger going through, family violence or domestic violence? What advice would you give them? What's one piece of advice?
Safety plan. That's a huge one. I didn't even know what a safety plan was. And I just jumped the gun, and I feel like, and I had no money. I didn't know what I was going to do or anything like that. And a safety plan is huge because more of the time, when women are men, either or, because either or can kill and become abusive and all those things, it usually happens because they find out that they're trying to leave and they didn't have a plan in place.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Jen, what about you?
As far as my sister's situation, get the help. Don't just rely on you just being able to walk away from the situation, because you don't know what that person's going to do. Mm-hmm. Unpredictable. You have no idea what's going on in their mind. My younger self, I would probably, I go back and forth on what I have told my mom back then. I was 9 when the abuse happened. Would I have gone back and told my younger self, tell her what's going on? Because I could tell by the conversation that these things were happening. And I could tell that she wouldn't have really believed me if I had said yes, based on just the things that she was saying to me. At 24 years old, when I told her about the abuse, I probably shouldn't have. I go back and forth on should I have not, and just tell myself that, you're going to come through it and you're going to be okay.
I think when it comes to talking about the abuse, whether, you're young, older, I feel like as far as being safe, someone needs to know. If you feel comfortable sharing. I know at one point I didn't want to share that I was being abused. But I know a lot of kids, tell their teachers or they have someone safe they can talk to. So I advise, you know, if you are going through abuse and you do feel safe, to speak up in case something does happen to you. Um, and there's also the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is 1-800-799-7233. I will also put that. You'll see it underneath the link for this podcast video and Spotify. And then also, if you are unsure if your town or your state has domestic violence services, if you go to the Fiercely Unfiltered Facebook page, my WhatsApp link is there, and also a link to direct message me. You don't have to make a big spiel. You can just tell me, you know, if you're looking for safety purposes for yourself, you can tell me that you want to order, you know, a product from me. And tell me what state or what town you live in. I can do the research and get it back to you. So that way you can reach out to local services. If safety is not a concern, you can kind of share your story so I can find you the right resources. And I want to say a big thank you to Jenn and Alexis for joining me today and kind of talking about a really heavy topic. I know this episode could be triggering for some. Definitely encourage you to decompress, do some self-care, whatever that may look like for you. Kind of like what I talked about last week. Take care of your body. It's the only one you have. It's very important that we take care of ourselves mentally and physically. Next week, we're going to jump in with Heather, and we will be doing a mental health check-in. I'm really excited for this episode. It won't be as heavy as this one, I promise, but it will have some really good mental health questions that we'll be talking about and diving into. And then I had 2 confessions that were sent in this week. One of them I thought was kind of fitting. She goes, "I'm married, but still look up my exes on social media." Not gonna lie, I've done it. I'll be honest. I want to know where they're at so they're far away from me, especially my abusers. I do not want to be in the same state as them. And then the next one, I have questions, okay? I use my wife's soap and she thinks it's our kids using it. So her soap keeps disappearing and she's blaming it on the kids. And my question is, how does she not smell it on you? Like, I've used Alex soap so I don't have to go to the store, and I don't know if he's noticed, but I know I smell like him and his manly soap. Like, it's not like mine. So, but I think that is so funny. I thought that was a good one to end the episode. But once again, thank you, ladies, for joining me. I will post Lexi's books. I will have some domestic violence information as well for you guys to reach out to, and there'll be some other links for you to check out. But I want to say thank you, ladies, so much. I really appreciate having you on Fearlessly Unfiltered. And until next week, bye, guys.
Bye.